Howdy everyone. This gear leg is now finished, at least temporarily, and by that I mean the gear leg the fairing is now completely done. Like I said, it's been completely trimmed and cleaned and trued and all of that. It's been mounted to the leg itself. Let me get this out of the way. So I have my spacing here set. Again, this spacing is personal preference, but I want both legs to be the same. So I've got the spacing set between the fairing and the fuselage, so I can duplicate that spacing on the other side. You can see how I have this cutout here for the clamp. So I have access to the clamp. I'm not able to have the body of the clamp on top like I was hoping. The fairing fits snug enough in here that it does have to be hidden a little bit below the fairing. As per the instructions, as I tighten the clamp, I heated these ears on both sides. I heated up the little tabs as I tighten this down so that they would soften and kind of conform to the gear leg and to the clamp. You can see that I still have my centerline reference here. That's centered on top of the gear leg. And then down at the bottom, it is centered on top of the gear leg here. And then using my laser, I was able to align the fairing so that this entire trailing edge was lit up by the laser. So I'm confident that this is pretty straight. It may not be exactly perfect. And by that I mean, by the time the beam gets out this distance from the laser itself, it starts to get a little bit wide. And I noticed on the top, the lasers seemed to be closer to this bottom edge. And then as I got down to this end of the leg, the lasers seemed to be a little bit closer to this top edge. And like I said, because of the knuckles of the hinge that's in here, there's some slop. So you can physically twist the leg between this end and that end, but even with twisting it, I couldn't get that to be absolutely dead on. So I'm like a half a laser beam width off, which my guesstimate is no more than like a 16th. So splitting hairs, right? So I'm happy with that. This leg is going to stay as is. I'm going to try not to disturb it too much, because I'm going to relocate the laser onto the other side and do the other leg. But I will come back to this. I'm going to start on my intersection fairings. I'm going to do the top intersection fairing first. That way my wheel fairings can continue to cure. And before I do that, I can't get the intersection fairing in here because this piece of wood that I'm supporting the airplane, it sticks out too far. So I'm going to have to lift the airplane. I'm going to have to pull this board out and either cut it or find a shorter board that won't interfere with fitting the fairing. But before I disturb the airplane, I want to make sure I got this fairing on and aligned. And I'm going to do the same thing to the other fairing, get it on and aligned, and should be good to go. So on this side, let me get this out of the way. So on this side, I'll have to take, obviously the fairing needs to come off, but I'll have to reposition the brackets and orient the stiffener that's underneath there. I'll have to do my brake line wrap with the Tygon tubing, and I'm going to cut down the bolts because they're a little too long, and then I'll add a washer underneath the head for reinforcement like I talked about before. And then I'll get my laser and all that set up on this side, and do the stiffener alignment, tighten everything down, attach the brake line, and then do the fairing alignments. I'll have to open up this hole here a little bit for the clamp and things of that nature. I'll have to make sure that the leg itself is trimmed and cleaned. I know I've done this one before. This feels great. So details. Everything needs to be trimmed, cleaned, and, just attached properly, and, a lot of things to consider, but take your time, work through it. I'll talk to you guys later. Howdy, everyone. I now have the right gear leg fairing in place and secure. I did the same setup that I had done on the other side, and I've already talked about this a little bit, where I found the center line, 90-degree angle, came out, laid down some tape, laid down some inch marks on the tape, and I did that again in the back. Found the center line of the airplane, came out 90 degrees, laid down some tape, put some inch marks on the tape, and I think, let me see what this is. So I've got 23, 24, 25, and 26 inches on this piece. So at that point, I take the laser and the tripod and I center it over, I think I was centering it over 25 inches. That's why the arrow is here, just to remind me to set it at 25 inches. So 25 inches from center line at a 90-degree angle is where I center the laser. And then I shoot the line across the floor. And then I make sure that beam crosses the same mark here, which is 25 inches. And then that of course then is lined up 25 inches, comes across 25 inches from the center of the fuselage, and that puts a beam on the leg. And then at that point I just take the beam and I rotate it so that it strikes a nice line all the way down the length of the leg, centered on the leg. And then at that point, like I had said, I put the leg stiffener in place, and I just orient that until the beam hits the edge of that stiffener, clamp it in place. I redid the way that I secure the brake line, which I've already talked about. And then I put the fairing on, and I do the same thing with the fairing. I put the fairing on, and then I adjust it so that the laser beam hits the very trailing edge of the leg all the way from top to bottom. And then I set the spacing from the leg, from the edge of the leg and the fuselage. It's roughly 3/4 of an inch gap. And they're the same on both sides. Once that gap is set, and once this edge is in alignment with the laser, I use a heat gun and I soften these ears on the top and on the back side. Now that the ears are soft, I tighten down the clamp and let that sit. Obviously that will cool. You want to verify that your black center line, your leg center line on your fairing is roughly centered on the leg here. It'd help if I had it in camera. This line here across the leg, and then of course you have that same line comes down, and you want it roughly centered on the leg here. So now this gear leg is done, or the fairing is now done, and I'm moving back to the wheel fairings. So I have that still set up over here. And again, while you're going through this, continue to verify that the fuselage has not moved, it has not shifted. Just make sure that it's still level fore and aft and left and right. So now I'm back to the fairings, and the epoxy, or not the epoxy, the fuel tank sealant is secure enough that I'm comfortable going ahead and putting these back on. So you remember that I put the reinforcement, the fiberglass reinforcement patches on all of this with fuel tank sealant. So now, obviously I've got this clecoed back in place, and all I'm doing now is match drilling the holes here to the brackets that are underneath. I've got these two done, and like always, I prefer to use countersunk head screws, because as you tighten them down, the countersunk head kind of finds its natural center. So these are now done as far as match drilling, and I will go ahead. These are all number 6, the ones around that connect the front to the rear. I'll match drill these. As I match drill these, I'll put in a number 6 countersunk screw one at a time. These 4 here, these 4 copper, these are not screws, these are actually rivets. So I don't have to do anything else with these other than countersink them. But these do not get screws. And I will match drill these, but I have to make sure I match drill them to a number 4 rivet, not to a screw size. And then there are the 2 back here. These are screws, so these will be match drilled, and I'll put countersunk screws in here. And that's it. So that's what I'm working on now. I'll finish match drilling everything. The number 8 screws, the number 6 screws, and the number 4 rivets. Once I get everything match drilled, everything will come apart. I'll do all the countersinking. These will get countersunk for a number 6 screw countersunk head. These are number 8. These will get countersunk for number 8. Those 2 back there will get countersunk for number 8. These 4 copper ones here will get countersunk for a number 4 rivet. And then I can put this back on, do the other side, and then it's going to be time for the intersection fairings. So it's going to take a little bit of time to get this done, but once I get there and I start on the fairings, I'll come back.